Weird doesn't always mean scary. Sometimes, it's fascinating, something that instantly captures our curiosity. In the world of celebrities, perfection is the exception, not the rule. For many famous black stars, it's their strikingly unusual appearances that make them unforgettable. Bodies that defy conventional beauty standards often carry a rare, magnetic allure. Some were born with features the world had never seen before, while others were shaped by surgeries that went too far. Natural or artificial, these stories reveal the lives of 25 famous black individuals with the most bizarre bodies. The question is, are they proud of how they look, or secretly insecure? Hound Dog Taylor. A blues legend with 6 fingers on each hand, hands that looked almost monstrous, and sounded absolutely unforgettable. Hound Dog Taylor was one of Chicago's most explosive electric blues artists, carving his name into music history with raw, feral guitar work and a voice so gritty it felt scraped straight from the pavement. He wasn't just a musician, he was a symbol of rebellion, a force audiences couldn't shake once they heard him. He was born different. Not subtly different, visibly different. 6 fingers on each hand. Not a deformity that faded with time, but an unmistakable excess that stayed with him for life. As a child, those hands drew long stares, hushed whispers, even pity. People talked. They speculated. Some claimed it meant he was cursed, others said it marked him for an unnatural fate, maybe even something darker. And slowly, people learned to keep their distance. But as the early 1930s rolled on and blues music bled into street corners and smoke-filled bars, those same hands began to reveal their true power. On a guitar neck, the extra fingers weren't hidden, they were unleashed. Taylor attacked the strings with a ferocity no one had heard before, bending notes harder, sharper, dirtier. His sound cut deep, wild, dangerous, and electrifying. Some believed his unique anatomy gave birth to that sound, a tone that thrilled listeners while making them just a little uneasy. By the 1960s, as Hound Dog Taylor toured through small Chicago clubs, his 6-fingered hands became legend. Under dim lights and heavy smoke, he played like a man possessed, as if every extra finger was screaming through the amplifier. To some, it was a tragic flaw. To others, a strange gift from fate. And eventually, people understood the truth. That body never held him back. It set him apart. Those 6 fingers became his signature, branding his music with a twisted, untamed tension that mirrored his life itself. Hound Dog Taylor didn't overcome his difference. He turned it into thunder. Antonio Alfonsica, a major league pitcher born with 12 fingers and 12 toes. Antonio Alfonsica was never the flashiest name in American baseball, but he became one of the most unforgettable. Season after season, he quietly grinded at the highest level of the game. Durable, reliable, and impossible to ignore. He wasn't a headline-chasing superstar, yet his presence left a permanent mark on baseball history. From the moment he entered the world, Alfonsica was different. 6 fingers on each hand. 6 toes on each foot. 24 digits on one body. A condition so rare it instantly drew stares, whispers, and endless speculation. As a child, that difference brought isolation and doubt. People didn't wonder who he would become, they wondered if he even had a future. When the 1980s arrived and young Alfonsica began chasing baseball seriously, those extra fingers and toes were part of every practice, every pitch, every hard landing on the mound. Some believed his unusual hands changed the way he gripped the ball. Others thought it gave him an unspoken advantage, movement that felt unpredictable, pitches that hitters couldn't quite read. By the 1990s, when Alfonsica officially reached professional baseball, his secret was no longer private. Newspapers picked it up. Sports circles buzzed. Fans were curious. Skeptics were loud. Too often, people noticed the fingers first, and only later remembered the talent. That scrutiny followed him like a shadow that never faded. Yet through his peak years in the late 1990s and early 2000s, Antonio Alfonsica stood his ground on the mound. He pitched through the noise, through the rumors, through the pressure. His unusual body never pushed him out of the game. It shaped him, forced him to accept it, forced him to own it. And in doing so, he turned what made him different into something unforgettable. DJ Paul was never supposed to blend in. Born with a severely deformed right arm, thin, twisted, and weakened by Erb's palsy nerve damage in the womb, his body marked him as different from day one. His hand was shrunken, difficult to control, and even showed signs of an extra finger. A small detail to some, but a constant reminder to him that he stood apart. DJ Paul would later become a defining force in Southern hip-hop, a co-founder of 3 6 Mafia, and one of the architects behind the gritty, dark sound that reshaped the genre. His rise didn't come with loud announcements, it crept in quietly, but with enough force to carve his name into modern music history. Growing up in rough neighborhoods during the 1980s, his physical condition was more than a medical issue. It became a psychological weight. Simple daily tasks were harder. Standing in front of people took courage. Over time, the visible difference chipped away at his confidence and pushed him into isolation. But instead of breaking him, it redirected him. DJ Paul stopped focusing on how he looked and started focusing on how things sounded. Rhythm, texture, atmosphere. Music became the place where his body no longer limited him. By the 1990s, as Southern hip-hop began its rise, he locked himself into the studio with relentless intensity. That damaged arm was present in every session, every beat, every long night behind the boards. The imbalance in his body created tension, and that tension bled into his sound. Darker, heavier, more aggressive. Through the late 90s and early 2000s, as 3 6 Mafia exploded onto the scene, DJ Paul's physical imperfection became part of his public identity. Audiences didn't see weakness. They saw resilience. His arm didn't push him out of music. It gave him a deeper emotional edge, one that made his sound unmistakable. Dizzy Gillespie, a jazz legend instantly recognizable for those balloon-like, puffed cheeks. More than just a visual curiosity, Dizzy Gillespie was a founding father of bebop, a revolutionary trumpet player whose influence reshaped the course of modern jazz forever. His music was explosive and unpredictable, bursting with raw energy and daring imagination. Every note challenged expectations, pushing jazz into uncharted territory and securing Dizzy's place among the immortals of the genre. But beyond his undeniable talent, there was something about him that made audiences stop cold the very first time they saw him play. Dizzy had a rare condition called laryngocele, which caused his throat and cheeks to swell dramatically whenever he blew into the trumpet. In his early years, it was barely noticeable. But as time went on, those cheeks grew larger and more pronounced, becoming impossible to ignore on stage. The moment he raised the horn, his face seemed to transform, as if his body itself was responding violently to the power of the music. By the mid-1940s jazz boom, when Dizzy was lighting up nightclubs and concert halls across America, those puffed cheeks had become his unmistakable signature. Audiences watched in fascination, and sometimes discomfort, believing his body was under immense physical strain. Every performance looked like a daring exchange, physical endurance traded for an explosive, electrifying sound. As the 1950s arrived and Dizzy's fame spread worldwide, those swollen cheeks became his calling card. Many came to believe that this unusual physical trait somehow fueled the fierce intensity and energy of his trumpet style. And through decades on stage, right to the very end of his career, Dizzy Gillespie never hid it. He played proudly, cheeks inflated, fully exposed to the world. What some might have seen as a flaw never made Dizzy insecure. Instead, it set him apart, amplifying his mystique and helping cement his image in jazz history. His story stands as proof that true legends aren't defined by perfection, but by the courage to turn difference into destiny. Salif Keita, an African music icon born with skin so pale it stunned the world around him. Salif Keita is one of the most influential voices in modern African music, the man who carried the soul of Mali far beyond the continent and into the hearts of a global audience. His sound is powerful, raw, and deeply rooted in identity, making him a truly irreplaceable legend. But from the moment Salif Keita took his first breath, his life was marked by shock and fear. He was born with full-body albinism, ghostly white skin, light hair, and eyes painfully sensitive to the sun, a stark contrast in a traditional Black African society. In his early years, this difference came with crushing prejudice. Even members of his own family rejected him, branding his body a bad omen, a curse. Isolated and shunned from childhood, Salif grew up on the margins of his own community. As the 1960s unfolded and his musical talent began to emerge, his albino body continued to shape every step of his life. Mali's unforgiving sun became a daily battle, and stepping into public spaces meant enduring endless stares, curious, uneasy, sometimes hostile. In that world, music became his only refuge. On stage and in song, Salif could exist without judgment, without fear, just as a voice. That sense of exile carved itself into his music. It made his voice deeper, fiercer, and heavy with emotion. Pain turned into power. By the 1970s, when Salif Keita finally left home to chase a professional music career, the journey was anything but smooth. On those early stages, audiences didn't just listen, they stared. Whispers followed him under the lights. But Salif refused to be broken. He sang louder, stronger, until his voice could no longer be ignored. The body once feared and rejected would one day stand on the world's most prestigious stages, shaking souls, moving millions, and rewriting the story of African music forever. Abdullah the Butcher, a wrestling legend whose forehead looked like a map of hell itself. Few names in professional wrestling are as infamous as Abdullah the Butcher, a man synonymous with brutality, hardcore violence, and matches that made audiences recoil in disbelief. He never stepped into the ring to look heroic or polished. He entered to terrify, to dominate, and to leave scars, both on his opponents and on himself, that fans would never forget. From the very beginning of his rise in the 1960s, Abdullah chose the most punishing path imaginable. As his fame grew, so did the razor blade cuts carved into his forehead, done deliberately to produce real blood and raw realism. At first, the wounds were shallow, but even then, his face became a symbol of danger. Fans weren't just watching wrestling, they were witnessing flesh split, blood pour, and a man willing to sacrifice his own body for authenticity. Abdullah traded his appearance for shock value, and the crowd couldn't look away. Over the decades, his forehead stopped resembling normal skin altogether. Match after match, year after year, he continued slicing himself open in the ring. Scar layered upon scar, until deep, uneven grooves formed, thick, swollen ridges that looked like plowed earth stained purple. By the 1970s and 1980s, when Abdullah the Butcher was haunting rings around the world, his forehead was so deeply carved that fans swore you could drop a coin into its crevices. Even as the years passed and the spotlight faded, Abdullah never tried to erase that terrifying image. No plastic surgery. No cover-ups. That grotesque, scarred forehead became his badge of honor, a permanent reminder of the extreme price he paid for turning pain into spectacle and his own body into unforgettable entertainment. Bolaji Badejo was the man whose body brought one of cinema's greatest nightmares to life. Tall, impossibly thin, and hauntingly otherworldly, he didn't just play the alien in Alien, he was the alien. His brief appearance forged an image so terrifying that it became a permanent symbol of sci-fi horror, etched forever into film history. Standing nearly 6 feet 10 inches, Badejo's body was unlike anything audiences had ever seen. His arms and legs were unnaturally long, his shoulders narrow, his chest slight, every feature stretched into an unsettling silhouette. He was born with Marfan syndrome, a rare genetic condition that affects connective tissue, causing extreme height and fragility. In his early life, this wasn't a gift, it was a burden. His towering frame drew stares everywhere he went. Even standing still in public made him feel exposed, different, and painfully isolated. The sense of not belonging followed him throughout his youth. Everything changed in the late 1970s while Badejo was studying in England. One night in 1978, filmmakers noticed him in a bar, his height, his thin frame, his eerie presence impossible to ignore. When he stepped into the creature suit for Alien, it was a perfect, almost fateful match. His body seemed designed to inspire fear. The slow, unnatural movements, the way he glided rather than walked, made the alien feel disturbingly real, less like a costume, more like a living nightmare. But behind the scenes, the role took a heavy toll. The costume was massive, the sets were cramped, and the physical strain was intense. For a body already fragile, every scene was an endurance test. Badejo pushed himself to the limit to create something unforgettable. When Alien was released in 1979, it exploded into a global phenomenon. The creature became iconic, and so did the body that gave it life. Yet Badejo never chased fame. He stepped away from acting soon after, disappearing quietly from the spotlight. His towering, fragile frame faded from public view, but his legacy did not. Bolaji Badejo may have appeared only briefly on screen, but the fear he created will live on forever. Some legends don't need many words or scenes. Sometimes, all it takes is one unforgettable shadow in the dark. Yellowman. Born with albinism, a crooked jaw, and a body thin as a reed, Yellowman looked nothing like a star Jamaica was ready to embrace. Yet he would become one of the most influential figures in reggae and dancehall history, an artist who took raw street sound and blasted it onto the global stage. With his fearless performance style, unmistakable voice, and commanding presence, Yellowman became impossible to ignore. But long before the fame, his pale skin, light hair, and sun-sensitive eyes made him stand out in all the wrong ways under Jamaica's blazing skies. In a culture steeped in superstition, albinism was seen as a curse, a bad omen. The stares were constant. The prejudice was relentless, even within his own family. It wasn't until the 1970s that Yellowman carved out his place, performing at street dances and outdoor sound systems where dancehall was born. But the same tropical sun that lit up those stages became his silent enemy. Hour after hour, day after day, his unprotected skin absorbed damage. His already fragile body paid the price. By the early 1980s, just as Yellowman was rising to dominance in dancehall, the consequences became unavoidable. Skin cancer set in, a common and devastating reality for albinos living under harsh sunlight. Multiple surgeries followed. Parts of his lower jaw and mouth were removed, leaving his face permanently uneven. Eating became difficult. His weight dropped. His appearance grew more shocking with every public appearance. Still, Yellowman never hid. He stood tall, scars exposed, voice unbroken. His altered body became a living testament, not to weakness, but to survival. A man who gave everything to the music, even as it slowly took pieces of him away. Yellowman didn't just make dancehall history. He survived it. Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice. A comedian with a tiny head perched on a stocky body, Lester Beetlejuice Green became one of the most shocking and unforgettable faces in American pop culture. He didn't need polished jokes or refined timing. His mere presence stopped people cold and glued their eyes to the screen. From the moment he was born, Lester's body defied every expectation. Rare microcephaly combined with severe dwarfism left his proportions dramatically different from the norm. Early life offered no humor in that difference. Every simple act, walking, speaking, standing in a crowd, came with struggle, stares, rejection, and deep isolation. Rumors followed him, too, with many assuming his unusual brain structure affected his thinking, making his behavior unpredictable and misunderstood. Then came the 1980s and 1990s. What once brought pain slowly transformed into attention. As Lester stepped into street performances and television, his small frame and tiny head became a strange, magnetic spectacle, something audiences had never seen before. People reacted with shock, laughter, and fascination, as if witnessing a body that shattered every familiar mold. By the late 90s and early 2000s, the name Beetlejuice echoed across mass media. His deformity was no longer a source of shame. It became his signature, a badge he wore proudly. And over time, Lester proved it wasn't just his appearance that captivated audiences, but his raw, unpredictable humor. In his story, the line between tragedy and entertainment blurs, raising a haunting question. When someone is born different and thrust into the spotlight, where does laughter end, and where does pain begin? Manute Bol. A giant so thin he looked like a walking tree. His name alone made the entire professional basketball world stop and stare. Born in Sudan, Manute Bol stepped into the toughest league on earth and instantly became one of the tallest centers in NBA history. His career was defined by jaw-dropping shot blocks and by something even rarer at the time, the presence of an African player who looked like no one the league had ever seen. When Manute Bol appeared on the court, every eye locked onto him. Standing nearly 7 feet 7 inches tall, his height was almost unreal. His body was impossibly lanky, with arms and legs that seemed to stretch forever. But what shocked people most wasn't just how tall he was, it was how fragile he looked. His skeleton rose sky-high, yet his muscles never fully filled out. Gaunt, lightweight, and narrow, he looked like a single hard bump could send him crashing to the floor. Yet this body wasn't an accident. Back home, among the Dinka tribe, towering height, long limbs, low body fat, and minimal muscle mass were common traits. Those genetics became even more striking when Manute arrived in America and entered the physical world of professional basketball. Surrounded by bulky, muscular athletes, Manute Bol stood out like a towering bamboo pole in a forest of oak trees. In his prime, every time he ran onto the court, the atmosphere shifted. His strides were long, his movements awkward, his thin frame trembling with every step. Fans watched in awe and in fear. Sometimes, just seeing him take a light hit made the entire arena hold its breath. His body always looked like it might break. Yet that same unusual frame became his greatest weapon. Those endless arms turned him into an almost impassable wall, swatting shots out of the air with ease. Still, the lack of muscle came with a silent cost. It drained his stamina, wore him down, and limited how far his career could go. Had his body been sturdier, Manute Bol's story might have reached even greater heights. Victor Varnado, a white-skinned anomaly in the black community. A man many whispered about before they ever listened to him. Victor Varnado is a multi-talented entertainer, a sharp stand-up comedian and television personality known for his wit, intelligence, and unmistakable presence. He regularly appeared on major shows, crafting a reputation as a clever, charming storyteller impossible to confuse with anyone else. But long before the spotlight, Victor's appearance made people stop and stare, often longer than comfort allowed. Born with full-body albinism, his pale skin, light hair, and light-sensitive eyes set him apart from an early age. His childhood unfolded amid curiosity, gossip, and eventually open discrimination, even within his own black community. As he grew older, the stares grew harsher. Rejection became clearer. Isolation followed. So Victor turned to art, a place where difference didn't disqualify you, it defined you. He carried that body onto the stage. Under unforgiving lights that burned his already sensitive eyes, he stood exposed, vulnerable, and determined. Every performance was a test of survival, a body under pressure, refusing to disappear. Over time, Victor Varnado shattered society's narrow ideas of what a black man is supposed to look like. The albino body, once viewed as a weakness, even an omen, transformed into a symbol of resilience and pride. What once chained him in isolation now shines unapologetically beneath the stage lights. Shaun Ross is a fallen white angel in a world of color, an apparition born with albinism, marked by porcelain skin, pale hair, and light-sensitive eyes that seemed to glow against every crowd he stood in. Raised within the black community, he grew up feeling visually out of place, as if his body told a different story than the streets he called home. That sense of not belonging followed him through childhood and into his teenage years, a quiet weight he carried everywhere. Then fashion changed, and so did everything. In the early 2010s, as high fashion began searching for the rare, the striking, and the unconventional, Shaun Ross emerged as a visual shockwave. Under runway lights, his alabaster skin against a black-featured frame created something haunting and otherworldly. He didn't just stand out, he mesmerized. There was a cold, ethereal beauty to him, like a lost creature from another realm, impossible to ignore and even harder to forget. As his career grew, so did the power of his presence. On the runway, Shaun became a living paradox, heritage and history on one side, glowing white skin on the other. Between those opposites, he walked with quiet confidence, sharp eyes, calm energy, absolute control, leaving audiences in awe. What once made him feel misplaced became his greatest strength. In a world long ruled by rigid standards, Shaun Ross turned perceived otherness into authority, rising as an icon whose very existence whispered a powerful truth. Difference is not a flaw, it's a force. Seal. Scars like rugged mountain terrain etched into glossy black skin. Seal is one of those rare voices that transcends pop music, reaching straight into universal human emotion. His sound topped charts, earned major awards, and became so distinctive that a single note was enough for listeners to know exactly who they were hearing. He wasn't just a singer, he was the sound of an era. But long before the fame, Seal was fighting a silent war within his own body. From a very young age, discoid lupus erythematosus began attacking his skin, an unforgiving autoimmune disease that turns the body against itself. Childhood passed in pain. His facial skin was constantly damaged, torn, and scarred, the wounds deepening through his teenage years. The scars never faded. Instead, they hardened into raised, uneven ridges stretching across his cheeks and forehead, down his neck and into his upper chest, marks so striking they unsettled those who first saw him. Few would have dared to take a face like that onto the world stage. Seal did. In the early days of his career, attention fell on his scars long before his voice. They were scrutinized, misunderstood, even cruelly compared to criminal markings. His appearance made the climb to major stages far steeper than for most. Yet he kept going. And when his name finally went global, the very thing once seen as a disadvantage became his unmistakable signature. That scarred, textured face, paired with a powerful, soulful voice and unshakable confidence, made him unforgettable. In an entertainment world obsessed with smooth perfection, Seal stood as living proof that some paths are never smooth at the beginning. But that doesn't mean they can't lead somewhere extraordinary. Bushwick Bill. With his strikingly short stature, he turned what many saw as a deformity into one of the most unforgettable identities in hip-hop. A core member of the Ghetto Boys, Bushwick Bill became inseparably linked to some of the grittiest, most uncompromising street rap ever recorded. From the very beginning, his music helped carve out the raw, fearless sound that left a permanent scar on hip-hop history. Bill was born with achondroplasia dwarfism, leaving him standing at just about 3 feet tall as an adult. His arms and legs were short, his joints slightly curved, and his head larger than average, marked by a prominent forehead. From an early age, his appearance drew both curiosity and cruelty. As his peers shot up in height during their teenage years, Bushwick Bill's body remained the same, making the difference impossible to ignore. In crowds, his frame seemed to disappear, yet somehow, every time he appeared, all eyes still found him. People often underestimated him at first glance. But when street rap exploded in the late 1980s and early 1990s, an era obsessed with toughness, dominance, and intimidating images, Bushwick Bill refused to hide. Instead, he stepped boldly onto the stage, dragging his unconventional body straight into a genre built on physical bravado. The contrast was shocking. His small frame clashed violently with the heavy beats, razor-sharp lyrics, and merciless energy of the music. That clash became his power. What once set him apart became a weapon, a way to command attention, to claim space in a world that valued size and strength. Bushwick Bill didn't just survive hip-hop's harsh landscape, he rewrote the rules, proving that presence isn't measured in height, but in impact. Katt Williams. With his unusually small frame and shrunken features, Katt Williams has always stood out. He's one of America's most distinctive comedians, known for his razor-sharp, lightning-fast delivery and a personality that's impossible to dilute. From his earliest public appearances, his body alone made an impression, around 5 feet 5 inches, thin-framed, narrow-shouldered, with quirky proportions that looked even more striking next to average people. On brightly lit stages, his small body once seemed swallowed by the space. Yet that very contrast became part of the magic. His short stature and skinny build made every movement funnier, every entrance memorable. As his career grew, the contrast only sharpened. A small body carrying a huge voice, rapid-fire speech, and an aggressive confidence. What looked fragile stood unshakable under the lights, creating a paradox that made Katt Williams impossible to ignore. Zamina, or often labeled online as the woman with the giant fake butt, became a viral attention magnet through sheer visual impact. With an unnaturally tiny waist and massively exaggerated hips, she transformed her body into a brand. As her look grew bolder, so did her following, bringing lucrative ad deals and non-stop online buzz. The dramatic change began in adulthood, when her hips expanded to an estimated 55 inches while her waist hovered just above 27. The extreme waist-to-hip ratio gave her a doll-like silhouette, pushed even further through repeated Brazilian butt lifts and fat transfers. On camera, her oversized hips dominated the frame, making the rest of her body seem almost unreal. Many viewers believed the look was carefully engineered for shock value, but Zamina insisted it was simply her passion, her love for extreme curves. Whatever the motivation, over time that body became her signature. It sparked controversy, fascination, and disbelief, forcing audiences to stop, stare, and debate in awe. Tony Cox. An adult in a child-sized body. Tony Cox is a familiar face in Hollywood, known for stealing scenes in hit comedies and action films with sharp timing and undeniable presence. Born with achondroplasia dwarfism, he stands just over 3 feet tall, with short limbs, a stocky torso, and features that make him look like a child wearing an adult's face. Growing up, his difference made him an easy target. Blending in was never an option, and on camera, the contrast only grew sharper beside towering co-stars. Yet that same striking appearance became his edge. What once set him apart turned into a signature, opening doors to unforgettable roles fueled by bold physical comedy. Audiences often laughed the moment he appeared, before he even spoke. And Tony Cox learned to own it, turning stares into spotlight and difference into power. Nelson de la Rosa was known to the world as the smallest man on the planet. A Dominican actor who made his way into Hollywood, he was officially recognized by Guinness World Records and became an international media sensation. His adult height stopped at just 28 inches, small enough to be mistaken for a newborn, yet with fully adult proportions. When his images first appeared in the late 1980s, the public was stunned. His unique body opened doors on film sets, but it also came with isolation, standing among towering stars. The title brought fame, but it also invited relentless scrutiny. Every step carried a heavy physical and emotional toll. Perhaps that burden helps explain why Nelson de la Rosa's extraordinary life came to an end in 2006, when he was only 38 years old. Taye Diggs, a familiar face in American film, television, and musical theater, known for his breakout roles, rich voice, and polished gentleman image on red carpets. But from birth, Taye Diggs carried a hidden difference. Both hands had an extra finger, small yet unmistakable, giving them an uneven shape far from the norm. It wasn't just cosmetic, it affected daily movement and fueled deep childhood insecurity. When he entered acting and musical theater, the spotlight only intensified the fear. Every gesture, every close-up risked revealing what he tried so hard to hide. Diggs learned to control angles, poses, and wardrobe to keep attention away from his hands. Eventually, the pressure of Hollywood perfection led him to surgery, closing a chapter that had followed him since childhood. The change marked a turning point. His image now fit the industry's standard, and his rise to stardom accelerated. Today, the story of those extra fingers remains a little-known footnote in the life of a Hollywood star. J.J. Weaver, a familiar name in American college football, known for his toughness, durability, and relentless defense. From day one, scouts praised his spirit and grit. But J.J. Weaver was born different. Both of his hands have 6 fingers. A small detail that quickly became impossible to ignore once he stepped onto the field. His gloves had to be customized. His wraps were thicker. Every tackle drew curious stares. Many doubted whether a body like his was built for such a brutal sport. But those hands became his quiet advantage. A stronger grip, better control, a firmer hold in split-second battles. When moments mattered most, Weaver held on. Today, his once-questioned body is a symbol of dominance. Fierce tackles. No hesitation. No mercy. J.J. Weaver turned what made him different into what made him dangerous, and etched his image onto college football's biggest stages. Louie Rankin, the Jamaican reggae icon whose monster hand became legend. Known for his gritty rap-infused voice, hard street presence, and raw authenticity, Rankin left an unmistakable mark on Caribbean music. Born with 6 fingers on one hand, his unusual feature drew stares, mockery, and whispers of bad luck as he grew up. But Rankin never saw it as a curse. He faced ridicule head-on, sometimes literally, using the very hand people mocked to prove his strength. Instead of hiding it, he displayed it with cold defiance. Over time, the so-called oddity fused with his fearless persona, evolving into a symbol of power. By the 1990s, Louie Rankin's 6-fingered hand wasn't a flaw. It was his brand, inseparable from his name and legacy. Diandra Forrest, a groundbreaking model with skin so pale it once made the world stare. Born with albinism, Diandra entered the fashion industry at a time when beauty standards were rigid and unforgiving. Her flawless white skin, light hair, and striking eyes stood in sharp contrast to the familiar image of black women in modeling. Growing up, her difference brought pain. Mocked, excluded, even attacked simply for looking unlike anyone else. Yet Diandra never learned to hate her body. Instead, she turned what the world called a flaw into her greatest power. Stepping onto high-fashion runways and the pages of major magazines, she shattered expectations and challenged deep-rooted prejudice. Under the runway lights, her alabaster skin seemed to glow, giving her an ethereal, almost otherworldly presence. What once appeared strange began to be seen as rare beauty. Diandra walked with pride, letting her appearance tell a new story, one that proved difference is not weakness, but undeniable strength. Krondon, a muscular vampire with ghost-white skin. A standout rapper and actor from America's underground scene, known for a raw, gritty style that leaves a permanent mark on screen and stage. Born with full albinism, Krondon entered the world with porcelain-white skin that shocked onlookers. His family feared he was fragile, too delicate for sports or physical strain. But adulthood told a different story. His body broadened, muscles carved sharp and defined, thick shoulders, solid chest, each pale contour amplifying his power. The contrast was unforgettable, steel wrapped in a sugar shell. In the 2000s, his presence in entertainment was impossible to ignore. What looked weak and breakable became tense, hardened, and intimidating. Over time, that contrast only deepened, boxing him into an uncopyable image. Krondon became a name that echoed, dark, heavy, and haunting, long after every appearance. Wilma Rudolph was born with severely deformed legs, a cruel contrast to the destiny that awaited her. As a child, polio ravaged her body, her left leg withered, bones twisted, joints misaligned, muscles weak. She spent years locked inside an iron brace, leaning on a wooden crutch, every step heavy and uncertain, watched with pity while other children ran free. Standing alone was a struggle. Yet inside that broken body grew an unbreakable will. Through relentless effort and quiet defiance, the brace came off, the crutch was cast aside, and her legs learned to carry her forward. By her teenage years, the girl once unable to walk was sprinting with breathtaking speed. Those twisted legs became symbols of grit, not weakness. Wilma didn't just run, she shattered limits, outran doubt, and transformed a body once imprisoned by illness into an Olympic legend. Cardi B is one of the most recognizable faces in modern hip-hop, a superstar who rose fast, ruled the charts, and became a social media powerhouse. But alongside her success, her appearance has changed so dramatically that it's impossible to ignore. Over time, her natural proportions gave way to extreme alterations, oversized enhancements, an ultra-tiny waist, and a heavily exaggerated lower body shaped by multiple Brazilian butt lifts. The result is a figure that feels visually unbalanced, top-heavy, tightly cinched in the middle, and unusually heavy below, often drawing more attention than her music itself. This transformation isn't the result of a medical condition, but of choices made under relentless fame and public pressure, reflecting the extreme beauty standards pushed in the spotlight. Yet despite the controversy, Cardi B's talent, confidence, and bold personality continue to define her presence. Every star leaves a unique mark on the entertainment world. What's your take on this transformation? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the striking changes and untold stories behind today's biggest celebrities.